Well, today is Wednesday, May 8th, 2013, and we are interviewing Griff Killgrove at the Veterans Center in Walla Walla, Washington. And Griff Killgrove was born in May 27, 1937 in the Dalles, Oregon. My name is Dixie Ferguson. I will be doing the interviewing, and Michael Weberly will be doing the videotaping. The American Red Cross is videotaping this in sponsorship and partnership with the Veterans Legacy Project of the Library of Congress. And Griff, could you state for the recording what war and branch of service that you served in?
I served in the United States Army, Infantry branch. I served 9 years during Cold War and the Vietnam War. And I entered the service in 1961, at which time I went, I don't know whether I'm supposed to go into any detail here or not, but I went into the service from Alaska, where I graduated from Fairbanks. I went to Fort Benning, Georgia, where I went through the normal infantry officer orientation and parachute training. Then I was assigned to Fort Richardson, Alaska, as a platoon leader to a unit up there, which I served at 2 years.
Okay, and you've answered those questions, and the Vietnam War and the Cold War, and you enlisted from ROTC. Is that what
I got my commission through ROTC at the University of Alaska. Yes.
Mm-hmm. And again, you were in Fairbanks, Alaska at the time?
That's where the University of Alaska was then, or
yeah.
is now, yes,
okay.
Fairbanks.
And let's see, and why did you join?
I was a military brat. I was brought up in the Air Force, and being a normal boy, I rebelled against my father, who was in the Air Force, and decided I wanted to go in the Army. And of course, that was the only thing the ROTC offered at the University of Alaska.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so you got your assignment to Fort Benning. Can you share your first days down at Fort Benning? Can you remember what it was like?
It was just a normal driving on base and finding where my unit was and going through the normal training as a brand new second lieutenant.
Mm-hmm. Were you excited?
Yes. Yes and no. It was a new unique experience, and your first time out in the service and wondering what's going on. And
And can you just share a little bit about your boot camp training? I assume that was your boot camp was at Fort Benning.
Yes, it was, and it's nothing like an enlisted person. I mean, you're already an officer. You're not, and they don't treat you the same as an enlisted man. But it was an orientation course, where you learn how to be an officer, and you learn tactics and all that stuff that you would normally expect.
And you were there how long?
I believe, as I recall, it was a 2-month course, maybe 3, and which after that I went through Airborne Training.
Mm-hmm. There at Fort Benning?
At Fort Benning, right.
Mm-hmm.
And then
how'd you like that?
It was okay. It was the normal military training they put you through, where they a lot of harassment and a lot of yelling at you and all that stuff to make sure you landed correctly and all that other stuff, and then they put you on an airplane and pushed you out. So, at which time after you did 5 jumps, they gave you a little parachute wings, and you were moved on to the next assignment.
Do you recall how many jumps you made?
There was 5. There was 5 obligated, 4 normal ones, and then the last jump was what they call a combat jump.
What does that mean?
Combat means your full pack and a weapon and all that stuff, so that you got the feel of what it was like to jump out of an airplane fully loaded. Mm-hmm. And at that time, as I recall, we were jumping out at 1,000 feet, or maybe 1,200 feet. I can't remember which. So you did. It was C-123s, mm-hmm. and I think one of them was a C-130.
I I recall the old saying, why would you jump out of a perfectly good airplane?
Because I was under orders to do so.
Good. Good answer. I'm curious, was that in the summertime?
Yeah, no. I got commissioned in the Army in May, and I asked permission to go in later in the fall because I knew I was leaving Alaska. There were two reasons. One, I wanted to earn enough money to buy my uniforms when I went in, so I got permission to enter the service in September, which allowed me to go down south in the fall and winter, which I felt it would be better for me weather-wise, because I thought it would be too hot. So
August?
As it turned out, it was almost too cold, believe it or not.
Nothing like an August day in Fort Benning.
The humidity was what surprised me. So yeah.
Absolutely. So then you went back on up to Fort Richardson?
Once I was through with the training, my first duty assignment to be assigned to a unit was in Fort Richardson, Alaska, which is outside of Fairbanks. And I was there for 2 years. That's where I became a platoon leader in a rifle company. And I served in that capacity for a year, and then a year as a staff officer at battalion level, battalion level. And it was a normal 2-year assignment, at which time I completed, and then I left there in 1964.
And
went back to Fort Benning for a little more training. And
what kind of training?
It was, I can't remember now. It was some kind of training where I had a little delay before they sent me to Korea for a year. So.
Was Vietnam looming at that time?
Yes, it was. When I went to Korea, Vietnam was starting to happen. I went to Korea in 65 to 66, as I recall, and Vietnam was starting to develop. It was something we read about. And when I went to Korea, I was assigned to another brigade, which I became a brigade staff officer. And while I was there, they were sending people who were assigned in Korea TDY to Vietnam for 6 months to serve in some capacity down there. So it was an initial build-up to Vietnam, as I recall.
And then you went straight to?
No, I went back to Fort Benning for another year of assignment, at which time I became an instructor at the infantry school, and I was teaching infantry tank tactics for a year at Fort Benning. At which time I knew that as soon as that year's duty was over with, I would be getting orders for Vietnam, at which I did.
And you did?
I did. That was in early 1967.
Early 1967.
Yes.
So that's when things were starting to really warm up.
Well, actually it started warming up about the year earlier. They were sending lots of infantry battalions there in 66. Because I was coming back from Korea, I wasn't eligible to be going in the initial groups, and so I missed that early deployment. And so like I said, I served for a year as an instructor at Benning. And that's the normal progression for an infantry officer, was to have these assignments that help you grow in your career. And being an instructor is one of those progressions.
So the military was going to be your career? That was
I went in initially to become a career officer and make it a career, yes. Yes.
And infantry was your?
That was my branch of that's what I was given as my branch, and as my branch.
Okay, you're at Fort Benning, and the orders come for Vietnam.
Yes.
And can you just share your initial reaction, the reality of getting those orders?
It was something I expected. I don't know as I dreaded it so much as it was something that I just knew I had to do.
And not to be too political, but did you have a pretty good understanding of why you were going over there?
At that time, I think all of us that were on duty felt it was a just cause, and that I didn't necessarily look forward to going into combat, but I knew it was something I had to do. I was under orders to do. I'll be honest with you, I didn't expect to come home. I gave away everything I owned because I didn't expect to come home, and so but I went.
Very interesting.
I knew I was going to be a company commander, let's put it that way.
And the odds aren't so great for company commanders.
Well, a little better than platoon leaders,
True.
but not much.
Okay, you left from Fort Benning straight to Vietnam.
Yes.
And went into Saigon?
We landed at Nhut, as I recall, commercial airline. We left the United States from Travis Air Force Base outside of San Francisco. And we were put on commercial airplanes, and we departed, and within about 20 hours or so, we were landing in Vietnam.
And that first day?
Coming in, it was a very quiet flight because you were wall-to-wall soldiers. And coming in, we could see the bomb craters down below and all this other stuff. And when we came in, we landed, and we opened the doors. And as we were filing out, the line of soldiers returning was lined up out there because as soon as we were out, they got on, and the plane took off immediately when we left, or got off, and they got on.
The Freedom Bird.
And the Freedom Bird, yes. And well, and I saw someone I recognized in the line getting on. And I tried to stop to visit with him, and I realized I couldn't, but he was a helicopter pilot, and it was just kind of interesting because he kind of recognized me, but at the same token, his attitude was different than mine, obviously. But anyhow, it was a somber moment. Yeah.
Of course. You processed in at Nhut, and then within what, a few days?
You went, no, not a few days. It was actually the next day, I think, you kind of processed through. And at that time, they were, I had orders for the 25th Division. And so they didn't change that. I was an officer, and I guess they didn't really fool with the officers that much. But the enlisted men, I think, when they came in, they basically, depending on the needs of the units, how many casualties they had or whatever, they sent them off to fill gaps in, casualties. And so within 48 hours, I was with the 25th Division.
Was that Cu Chi?
That was at Cu Chi, yes.
Okay. Now it's combat. And would you mind sharing your first combat mission?
Well, that's the other part as an officer. I didn't join I joined a battalion, an infantry battalion, right away. They did not make me a rifle company commander right away. They made me the battalion S4, which is a supply officer. And so for the first 6 months of my one-year tour, I was the battalion S4, in which case I operated out of the base camp and loaded helicopters, and stuff like that to the units that were out deployed.
And everybody wanted to know you as a supply officer.
I basically, there was very little getting acquainted. All they cared about was what was on the helicopters and, the ammunition and stuff. But the second half of my deployment, I became a rifle company commander.
Because just...
Well, that was the other thing about Vietnam. The officers generally only got 6-month tours, at least the company commanders, 6-month tours as a company commander. I don't know whether there was a huge crush of officers who, in those days we called it getting our tickets punched. You needed to get your ticket punched to have command. And so company commanders usually only got 6 months as a commander. I got my company in the last 6 months of my first deployment. And it was one of those things I knew it was coming. I got my command, and within a couple days I was out in the field with my company after I got my command. My first deployment, I was out for 60 days without coming back to base camp.
Tell me about that.
Well, it was a case where our mission was to, out of Cu Chi, for some reason they decided to level the Boloi and the Hobo Woods with Rome plows.
I'm sorry.
With Rome plows, which were big caterpillars, or cats. And our battalion was an infantry battalion, and there was another battalion which was a mechanized battalion, which had the armored carriers, and then a unit of Rome plows. The armored battalion was deployed to secure the Rome plows as they went through and leveled the jungle. Our battalion, being an infantry battalion, our job was to go out and screen through the jungle and try to get rid of all of the Viet Cong and VC who were out there so that the Rome plows could do their jobs.
And the obvious reason for plowing was... They
felt that by knocking down the jungle out in the Hobo Woods, and that was a sanctuary for the Viet Cong, was by leveling it, we would be taking away their sanctuary. Didn't work. The whole area was a tunnel complex, and so we didn't do anything except level the trees and spent a lot of time cutting through jungle.
Did you experience the Cu Chi tunnels?
We found a couple.
Could you describe that?
Well, obviously I didn't go down in them myself. Some of my troops did, my men did. And because of the mission, we weren't allowed to spend a lot of time on them. We might spend a couple days securing the area while the division brought in engineers or whatever to do something, to, maybe explore them, to plant dynamite or whatever, and to try to destroy them, at which time we were moved out and continue on with our mission, which was to continue to clear the jungle around this Rome plow operation. And that took 60 days. We were out there without coming back to base camp. And every day it was a case where we were establish a perimeter, or more or less a protective overnight position, and we would deploy or move to another area the next day, in which time the Viet Cong would surround us or ring us with booby traps, and we would have to pick our way through booby traps or ambushes or whatever.
Every step of the
every day. Every day.
Step of the way.
Every step of the way we had contact every day, and we had casualties every day. Every day, yep. I lost 25 men in the 6 months I was there. That was killed. And a lot of us got wounded in the process.
That's really a story.
That's 6 months worth, though. I mean, that was only the first 60 days.
Wow. So after the 60 days, you were able to come back to base camp.
We came back and spent 3 days, in which case our mission had been changed to move from Cu Chi to Tay Ninh.
Okay.
And we took down the barracks and whatnot, the frame buildings we had and the canvas, took them down, put them on trucks, and we convoyed to Tây Ninh.
South Vietnam, Saigon is down toward the...
Saigon is in 3 Corps.
That would be the
first, second, third, fourth Corps. Right. It was down in the 3rd Corps area. Cu Chi was in the northwest area, about, I don't know, 50 clicks or so. From Saigon. And then Tây Ninh was another 40 or 50 clicks, or I don't know, maybe more, I'm losing, but closer to the Cambodia border.
Going
northwest, more northwest, towards the Cambodian border. Okay. So we moved up there, and we kind of reestablished ourselves while we were doing patrols around that base, which was around the Black Virgin Mountain. I don't know if you've heard of that or not. And we were there about, we're going out on missions around there, and we didn't have a lot of contact there, but we were just kind of reestablishing ourselves and getting into a new position, because the next mission was to move to the border up north of Tây Ninh.
Your mission was to...
We went on an operation called Yellowstone, I think it was.
To cut off the route?
And it was, again, to move up to the Cambodia border, and when we, at Khartoum they called it, it was no village there, but it was an old Special Forces site. And we set up patrols up there. This was in November of '67. You could look across the border and see the tin-roofed barracks of the NVA, and they would come over and mortar us and stuff like that and hit us whenever they felt like it, but you could see them across the border. And we were up there from November up through December. On Christmas Day, I think we got hit by 2 regiments, our battalion.
And approximately how many men would be in a regiment?
A battalion. Oh, a regiment. The NVA regiment was, I don't know, 300, 400, something like that. So they told us it was 2 regiments. I don't know whether it was that or not. But anyhow, we got hit by 2 regiments. I lost 5 men that night. And they got in through the wire and penetrated, and there was an artillery unit in the middle of our overnight position. And they hit, sappers got their ammunition, and they blew it up, and there was rounds blowing up all over the place and flying over there and landing and kind of cooking off at places around us. It was a pretty exciting night.
Did you go on all night long?
All night long, yeah.
And how did you get out of that predicament?
We just managed to get through the night, and we had a lot of artillery and airstrikes all night long, coming in around our perimeter, calling them in. And the next morning it was pretty black around us. And we drug in a lot of NVA bodies and piled them up along the road, and they brought in some bulldozers and dug holes and dropped them in. And we continued, with our normal missions, sweeping around and stuff. About New Year's Eve, that happened to another brigade down the road, in which we had to go in and relieve them because they got overrun also. And so what was happening, what we didn't know, but I guess maybe higher headquarters knew, maybe they didn't. But the NVA were mobilizing there, and they were on their way to Saigon. This was the beginning of TET.
The TET.
TET of '68. And what we weren't aware of, at least us, but we knew we were be seeing a heck of a lot of action, was that these guys didn't like us being there because we were in their way. And that area was the area that they funneled themselves down to Saigon.
You were in
And
the
we
middle
were
of a hornet's
and we
nest.
were in the middle of that. Yes.
Of a hornet's nest.
Yeah. And mostly they bypassed us. They just decided we were unnecessary to fool with, and they just went on by us. And that's why, in my opinion, or you know, in retrospect and everything else, I always am surprised that we were surprised with TET of '68, because there was all this activity going on. But
Did you think there were that many?
oh gosh, yeah, there was a heck of a lot of troops going by us. And there was several actions that went on our missions while we were up there, that our units, our various companies, got in some serious fighting, because they would, during the day, they'd pick us up by helicopters and drop us off. And sometimes they would be hot LZs, and sometimes they would be cold. But every time there was a hot one, the unit on the ground was fighting for their lives, and the helicopters were being shot down right and left, trying to support them or bring in, you know, ammunition, or trying to get them out. And then if you were out at somewhere where they weren't under fire, you were getting told that you're going to have to survive on your own, because there's no more helicopters to come in to get you out. And it was a pretty exciting time.
Okay. This is just so hard to imagine when you say you're on your own. What does that mean?
That means that you've been dropped into an area to kind of sweep through it to see if there's there, and you're expecting to be picked up to taken back to your
Landing zone.
camp over for the night, and you're being told that there are no helicopters left to come in and get you. So make do with what you got.
And what did you have?
A company, a rifle company.
And what kind of defense did you have?
Whatever we carried, you know, whatever we were carrying. And it was, you know, you were being told that there's a heck of a lot of troops coming down this way and a heck of a lot of troops coming down this way. You better just get scared. And so you basically looked for defensive positions, and, you know,
just basically hide.
No, just got into a defensive position where you could fight back, you know, and hold off until, you know, you were able to get reinforced or removed, you know, taken out.
Were you able to be in touch with base camp by radio?
Only our battalion. Only a battalion. I was a rifle company commander, and I had a battalion is set up where you have, at that time, 4 rifle companies and a headquarters. The headquarters was in our base camp, which was not anything like you'd expect. It was just a secure area, you know, defensive position. And the rifle companies were deployed and sent out, you know, in various places around that to kind of find the enemy, to make contact. And if they didn't make contact, they would normally pick you up on helicopters and move you to someplace, hoping to make contact somewhere. And hopefully you didn't get dropped into a hot LZ, you know, because these were NVA. These weren't. These were guys that were regular Army, just like us, you know, and they had the heavy weapons and the whole bit.
I'm just amazed at how many were recruited. I mean, North Vietnam isn't that big of a country.
Well, all I can tell you is that their whole country was mobilized. And we allowed them to get mobilized. We didn't.
What do you mean by that?
I personally feel like we did not go over there properly. We didn't go there to win the war. We did it by piecemeal. And we did not deploy properly. We were conventional forces against guerrillas, and we were misused. We were stomping around the woods as a conventional force. And then, of course, when we did decide to meet the regular Army, we didn't. It just seemed like we weren't ready to hold ground. We were too willing to just, okay, make contact, get as big a body count as you can, and then withdraw. And so you were constantly going after the same ground all the time, and just all you're worried about is body count.
That was the news always back home.
Yeah, what's the body count? And you know, that's all they were interested in, is how many bodies you got out there. And if you didn't have enough bodies, I don't know whether they generated them or not. But
would this be, in retrospect, a type of war that would be special forces?
No.
Navy of SEALs?
No.
Not even?
Not at this level, not where I was. I mean, because we were, you know, special forces are on the perimeter. Maybe they're something when you're first starting to feel, you know, enter a war, and you're trying to strike and take out things. Once you're in the war, you're there to destroy their army, or they destroy us, you know. And we didn't. We had the ability to go north into their country and do something, but we didn't. Just like I said, we could look across the Cambodia border and see safe havens, and we were not allowed to go get them.
Yeah. And did you have the one tour in Vietnam?
I had two.
Oh my goodness. So
I came back from that and went to back to Fort Benning, Georgia. And
after all of that experience?
Well, yeah, I was an infantry officer, and that was an MOS that was highly needed, you know, at the time, and being a career officer at the time. So they brought me back and sent me to Fort Benning, and they sent me to another school. This was what they call a career school, which is 9 months long, for captains and majors. And so I went to Benning to go to school, and in the class there was something like 400 captains and majors who had just returned from Vietnam. And they're going through the course, and then as soon as we were done, we knew we were going back for a second tour.
That was a given.
It was a given. We just knew it was a given. And so I went through that course, and which time I got orders to go back. At which time I went back as an advisor in Pleiku province.
Oh, you went north.
Yeah, I went to 2 Corps at that time. I went in as an advisor this time.
And the advisor's role was to be?
We were, the team that I was attached to was with the Providence chief, of which case I went in as the advisor to the RFPF commander of the Providence.
RFP.
RF is Regional Force, Popular Force. They had 33 Regional Force companies and 77 Popular Force platoons. The Regional Force companies were more the Province chief's strategic deployment units. They were companies. The PF platoons were village defense units, and I was assigned to the commander. I was his advisor, the commander of this, and then there were 3 districts within the deal, and I had teams out at the 3 districts within the province that worked with these units, and I stayed in Providence.
And what year was this, Griff?
This was 69-70.
69-70.
Yeah.
Were things tapering?
It was quiet that year in Pleiku province, primarily I think because of TET. I think we destroyed a heck of a lot of the enemy during TET. No matter how much damage they did to us, we still beat them. And they needed time, and because of our the way we were operating, we let them rebuild. And 1969-70 was a time of rebuild, and so the real excitement really was minor attacks against outposts, a lot of rockets into Pleiku city, You know, quite frequent. There would be sirens going off, and you just wait for the rockets to land and see where they landed. But as for any major military action at that time, it was minor. A lot of talk and not a lot of action in comparison to my first assignment.
And you went back for a full year again?
2 years, yes.
Full 2 years.
Yes, at which time, while I was in country, I decided I'd had enough and turned in my resignation. And
when you returned to Fort Benning again?
No, I turned in my resignation when I landed in Vietnam.
In Vietnam?
Yeah, I turned it in at the time that I landed, and then they let me know 1 week before my year was up that they accepted it.
Oh, so you...
I knew that they were going to do that. It was just simply that I knew that because while I was at Benning during the career course, there had been a couple of officers who had decided they wanted to resign. And they said, yeah, we'll accept them, but we're going to get another tour out of you. So they sent them to Vietnam for another year before they accepted them. So I decided I'd wait I decided I might as well wait till I'm in Vietnam before I turned it in.
Either way, you were going. Yeah.
I decided I'd had enough. I didn't feel like it was worth it anymore.
If I can take you back to that first tour, because those Coochie tunnels were so, I mean, they're like a tourist attraction now.
Yes.
They were so incredible.
Yes.
What, hundreds of miles long?
I think they might have stretched as far as from the Cambodia border all the way down, as far as I could, I mean, because they were quite extensive. They were multi-stories deep. I know there was one tunnel complex in the Boloy Woods that they found that they spent, I don't know how many weeks planting dynamite in it, and when they set it off, the earth dropped 20 feet. I mean, it was quite extensive. I mean, these things, they had rooms down there that were big enough to hold meetings of companies, I mean, and hospitals, and it was amazing how these people were prepared. And we went over there as a conventional force and totally unprepared for a guerrilla conflict.
You're describing it as guerrilla warfare.
It was definitely guerrilla warfare, and we were being utilized as totally wrong.
Did you ever interview any of them? I mean, prisoners of war. You brought him into base camp, the NVA. Did you?
I didn't have very many people we captured.
It's just a kill. It was war.
We didn't capture too many people. I mean, it was a case where they were killed.
Right. Did you?
And they had a habit of dragging off their wounded in any conflict, and you would find a lot of blood trails and things like that. I cannot remember actually. Only once did we picked up a couple casualties, or we found that tunnel complex, and in the middle of the night, a couple people popped up out of the ground, and they came up right in the middle of us, and we got them. In which case, we sent them out by helicopter the next morning.
Ages would range from what, young teens up to?
Oh, as far as them, yes, they were kids in our book. I mean, anytime you were in a village or and you saw children, you suspected them of capability of throwing a grenade at you or whatever. You never knew.
Could you explain why they were so dogmatic and determined? Just because they believed in?
Well, we did not. We violated all of the principles of war, and the first one being is know your enemy. We did not, no one paid any attention to the history of the country where they have been in war. They had been, trying to settle this strife between themselves for 100 years, 200 years. And we entered in thinking, the naive way of American thinking is that we can go in there just by showing ourselves that we can change their attitude. And it just doesn't work that way. And besides that, the way we went in, they looked at us as being French. They didn't know the difference. We were the same color skin. And so they had kicked the French out, and here we come in and replaced the French, and so I think they just thought of us as being French.
During your time over there, did you ever take an R&R?
I took one each tour.
You did, okay. So you did get a break.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Good. So
that doesn't necessarily help you because you got to go back.
Yes, it's hanging over your head while you're sitting on that beach. Yeah.
All you can think about is bring me another beer. I got to forget this thing, you know.
Yeah. Where did you go?
I went to Bangkok the first time and Hawaii the second. Yeah.
Well, nice choices, but like you say, it was.
Well, it's one of those things. You just, boy, that's too short. You know, I've got to go back.
Was it 1 week?
Yeah.
1 week.
Yeah.
Yeah. You get there and.
Well, that was the thing about those of us that were in a combat branch. You know, we were out there beating the bush, and you know, like the enlisted men now. Like I said, the officer now generally got a 6-month tour out in the bush. The enlisted men, they got a whole year. They didn't get there was every effort made to kind of send them to the rear, but it was a case of, after a while you realize the whole thing is trying to survive, you know, protecting each other and not taking unnecessary chances, because it was all you were doing was just beating the bush, and the enemy engaged you when they felt like it. And and maybe you might find someone by chance, but I mean, if he didn't want to engage you, he would withdraw. If he wanted to engage you, he would hit you when he wanted to and do as much damage as possible and then withdraw. So our contact was, no matter how much bush we hit and beat up and cut through and everything else, our contact went at his choice. And so we were frailing around out there. And after a while, you got to the point where I just want to survive this. There's no mission here. There's no direction. There's no goal here. It's just a matter of trying to survive.
And I think that drives you crazier than anything when you don't have the mission, when you lose the mission.
We didn't have a mission. We didn't lose anything. When it came to battles and things like that, we accounted for ourselves very well. We didn't lose a battle. We lost the war only because we didn't have a goal. You know, if we had gone for the heart of the enemy, you know, we might have won, but you know, not the way it was engaged.
How did you? I mean, you talk about cat and mouse game and playing with your mind, and it was almost like a mental.
It was
a mental game.
You wonder why so many people have kind of problems, you know. And your goal is to survive. Your goal is to go home, and your dreams are to go home. And then that's the other part of it, is when you get home, you know.
All right, let's go into that. Okay, so the end of your second tour,
How about the first? How about the first tour?
Well, let's do that. All right. Sure. Okay, and you went straight to Fort Benning.
Yes.
After you went out of Tonsonute to Travis?
Travis, yeah.
Okay, and how was that when you first arrived? Well, let's say the first day on the plane going home. Describe that and landing. Well,
obviously I left. When I was leaving in the middle of TET. It was still going on, you know. And so when we were brought from the field to the Tonsonute area, you know, where I can't remember the area was, but they took away our weapons and stuck us in this area, and here we were sitting knowing there's a war going all around us, you know, and we didn't have any way to defend ourselves. So it was a very unnerving time. Obviously, I guess there was better security around there than we knew, but we didn't feel like it was secure. But we spent a day there, and then they got us ready to throw us on the airplane, and here we became a line just like that line was when I came in. And we were just got in line and just holding our breath and hoping that the plane would come in and hoping we'd get on and hoping the plane would get off the ground, and when it did, there was some cheering on board. Yeah. But it wasn't exactly all that good until we landed. You know, there's always that feeling like, will this damn plane make it, you know? But
I'm almost there.
Yep, almost there.
Yeah.
And then we landed.
In Travis?
In Travis, yeah.
Any reception?
Not good. Not good. It was, it's one of those things when you have such high dreams, you know, and your expectations and everything else, and it just never matches that, you know. It just, you got these antagonistic people waving things at you at the airport, and you got all kinds of different receptions there. But even getting together with family, you know, it was one of those things that nobody knew how to deal with you. And I like to liken it to the fact that when we went into service, we left a society of round pegs. And then we went through all this training and everything else, and then when we got over there, we went through all this stuff, and all this things that were going on, they kept knocking edges off. And before we came home, we became a square peg. And so we come home and we go into a society of round pegs, and we're square pegs. And nobody knows how to deal with us. And they put the burden on us to try to become round pegs again. And we can't. We've had a year of Boston massacres, you know. I mean, they have one day, we've got a whole year of those days. Daily bombings, daily ambush, daily bodies, daily everything. And we come back as square pegs and to put the burden on us to become round pegs again.
It's very well defined.
And that's the way it's been ever since.
Ever since.
Ever since we've been home. We just basically are outsiders. We can be in a room of people and we're the loneliest people around when we're surrounded by people, but because we have there's no contact.
Your buddies, I'll just use, for want of a better word, your buddies. That's probably your comfort zone, are your buddies?
Yes. We have an instant communications and comfort.
They understand.
We understand each other. Outside the group, you basically don't. I mean, even family. I'm talking about family and everybody.
Do you think mainly because it was an unpopular war, or because that's war?
That could be war. Although being a popular war would have helped. Now, you know, everyone says, well, we didn't get our parade. It takes more than a parade. It takes more than those yellow ribbons and more of a parade, because it requires, because all of a sudden when you're going back into a working, you know, like leaving, you know, if I'd stayed in the service, I think I'd probably been better off because I would have been around my peers. But by leaving the service, I went into an environment where nobody served and had ever been involved. And I was expected to meet their standards. I mean, all the work jobs that I've had since then, I was expected to meet their standards. If for instance, I was trained that you'd be given a mission and you analyze it, and you make all of, you analyze it and evaluate it as best you can, your people, your resources and all that stuff, and you make a decision and you go with it. If you have time, you take as much input from people as you can, but the bottom line is, as the commander, you make a decision and go. And everyone basically is trained to follow you because they train you. Everyone's trained the same way and they trust you. You get into a civilian environment and it's hardwired into you, and so that's the way you operate. So if you try to do that in a civilian environment, you're all of a sudden with people who got to have a committee. You got to have a committee, and you got to talk about it. Meetings. And if you don't talk about it, well, how long is the talk got to go on? Well, in a civilian environment, it's forever. There are no decisions ever made, and so that, and then if you lose your temper, which we have a tendency to do because we have very short fuses for nonsense, then you're counseled because you need anger management, you need some kind of training to get control of yourself. Well, I'm convinced that there's nothing wrong with me because I'm rational. It's a case of getting things done. It's everyone else is fouled up. Well, it's just the opposite. Anyhow, you're a square peg in a round peg world. So
that is one of the best descriptions I have heard of someone coming back into what they called the real world.
Yeah. It's just totally changed. All your hamburgers and milkshakes that you dream of, and all your girlfriends, and nobody knows how to deal with you. And you don't have anyone to talk to. And if you do find someone, after a while they say, well, you get over it. You understand the problem now. It's time for you to get over it. It's something that doesn't leave you. It's there. It's hardwired.
I think your dramatic description of the Boston bombing every day.
Yeah, we sympathize with those people, and the pictures are very graphic and all that stuff. Take that for 365 days where you see that. They didn't offer us that counseling and stuff like that when we came back. And these people out at the VA now most of them there have never experienced it. They still don't understand us, and we just have to live with it. And you wonder why there's suicides is because people they just can't deal with it, the loneliness, it's a lonely environment.
You do feel like you're all alone in the world.
You are alone in the world, and you're tired of it, and you just feel like you're going to I don't know, because I think it's because they reach a point where they feel like they're doing everybody a favor getting out of their life because they realize they don't belong. And it's just the opposite, they do belong.
Absolutely. So then you're talking about 2 and 3 tours.
Alaska is considered a hardship tour in those days. Korea definitely is a hardship tour, and then 2 years in Vietnam. So out of 9 years, I had 5 hardship tours.
Wow. It's
5 years.
Very, very overwhelming. And nobody outside of a buddy can be in your shoes to totally understand this.
Well, that's the other part too. They didn't send us over as a unit. They sent us over as individuals, and then we had to join a unit that had already been together, and they'd lost friends, and I get into the survivor bit that some of those that were surviving, they didn't want newbies around them. Because the newbie would get them in trouble, because they'd be making mistakes and say they didn't want to touch them. So being a new person joining an existing unit there, it was difficult because you had trouble breaking in. You were possibly bringing them into danger because you would do something stupid. So you had that problem to get into. Then you became a seasoned person, and you had the, you know, a newbies coming in. So, and then you survived, you did all right, and then when it got towards the end of your tour, you became a short timer, and then you got fearful hey, I've only got a month to go, I've only got a week to go, or something like that. And so I mean, it was a whole, it was a cycle of emotions you went through for that whole year.
Boy, that's very, very articulate. It's ironic. One of these questions is, did you see combat? I think we've gone way beyond that one. And it's ironic. It says, did you have plenty of supplies? My goodness, you've answered that. Did you feel pressure, stress?
Well, you were 24 hours a day, you know, basically 7 days a week, 365 days.
Never fully.
And you basically were spending the time sweeping during the day and then expected to put out patrols at night. So your sleep was, you really didn't have sleep for the whole time. You know, you were exhausted and you're operating on just whatever.
When you came home after this second time, you probably looked in the mirror maybe and just said, wow, I'm not that young guy anymore.
Well, I read a book recently that basically described the guys coming home, and they basically said they came home with young bodies but old heads. You know, and you're different. Yeah.
Very true.
And that's the other thing. You asked me how it was like when I came back. When I hit Seattle, I went to Seattle when I got out, and I started pounding the streets. It was a recession in Seattle at the time, and they had the signboards up saying, "The last one out of Seattle, please turn out the lights." You know, so every job I applied for or went looking out for was 50 Boeing engineers or something applying for the same job. But I remember going to, this describes how they met us. I had a college education, 9 years as a manager in the Army. I went to this employment agency, and this young girl looked over my application and she says, "I'm not sure what I can do for you. Your college education is 9 years stale, and your military, I can't use it all." And so basically I was faced with going out there and knocking on doors and trying to convince somebody to hire me. And
what did happen?
I ended up getting a job as a trainee at a bank, a mutual savings bank in Seattle, which I worked at for 11 years. But that was where I went, initially. But it was strictly knocking on doors.
Well, it's you mentioned the word survival, tenacity. Did you? I hope you got the GI Bill.
I didn't use it.
You already had been in. You already were graduated from.
I was a graduate in college.
Graduated. I'm sorry.
I could not go back to college. I had the ability to. I tried to study. I couldn't concentrate. As I recalled, when I went to college and before I went in there, it was a case of memorizing grocery lists and things like that to pacify professors to get a grade. And I would read these grocery lists, and I couldn't remember. After going through them, I couldn't remember the first thing on the list. So I just, my mind would not let me go back. It was something that I couldn't physically do myself.
It almost, to use.
Well, everything was anticlimactic. Everything in your life, after you've been through combat and survived it, everything was anticlimactic. It was, what's the point, you know, or whatever. It was just, it's a
certain amount of depression about.
Lots of that.
Sure.
Your survivor guilt and all that stuff. Yeah.
Absolutely.
A lot of guilt on, did I make the right decisions? Did these people die because of something I did? And these are, I'm coming to grips with a lot of this now, realizing that I had no control over that, but I was trained to believe that I was responsible for their lives and everything else, and yet these orders were coming down to do these things which I had absolutely no voice in. And
you've
so
come to grips with that?
I'm coming to grips with it, and it's basically understanding that a lot of my decisions were just simply to try to reduce casualties and not have people take unnecessary risks, because what we were doing was just kind of beating holes through the jungle. And
an awful lot for one person to process through.
a lot of us had those decisions.
Mm-hmm. So,
and that's something you don't. Who do you talk to?
Mm-hmm.
I was advised. I came back from. My hardest time was between tours. I had trouble at the car course, and one time I actually had an opportunity to talk to one of the senior officers, and I asked him, where do you go to talk to people or somebody? Because at that time an officer didn't go and ask for help because it was a career breaker. And his answer to me though was, well, that's why you get married, so you've got someone to talk to. And of course most of the marriages break up because of that. So I mean, it was constant. There was nowhere to go.
Yeah. Ideally, but again, reality. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think even today,
Well, it's the same. It's the same today.
Uh-huh.
They say
Relationships.
these they're because of us, the Vietnam vet. They say that, oh, we've got a better handle on these new vets. They don't.
I believe that.
The yellow ribbons and the parades and all that stuff are temporary. And the next day, these kids are faced with the same struggles we had. Maybe, and their combat time, okay, they haven't lost as many men. We lost 58,000, and maybe they've only lost 3 or 4. I'm not trying to take anything away from them, but it's, combat is combat.
And that's why I think you have so much to offer, just
but
what you're saying today.
You can't force yourself on people. If someone wants to talk, all you can tell them is I'm available. Mm-hmm. But if you try to come up to you or anyone else and say, hey, I'm going to help you, you're going to rebel. You're going to stand back. Wait a minute, I'm not asking for any help. There's nothing wrong with me. You just got to wait for the person to come to that position in life where they're going to actually look for someone to talk to.
That makes sense. Mm-hmm. So I know that you've been involved with the veterans organizations.
I'm a member. I'm not necessarily active.
I'm putting words there.
Well, the problem with any organization is all they're interested in is looking for someone to run for officers or something, and they'll eat you up. And so I'm a member, yes, for the fact that there's power in numbers, to go to Congress or whatever.
Sure.
And so I'm a member for those reasons, but I'm not active in any of those, just because I've got other things I need to do.
Yeah. And you found your way to Walla in retirement.
Yeah. Yeah. Not in retirement.
Oh,
I actually got a job offer over here.
Oh, and that was still
1981. Actually, yes. I got a job offer, and I moved over here in 1981.
81. Okay, and you've been obviously here ever since.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Do you do any traveling at all, Griff?
No.
No traveling.
Nothing serious. There's no place out there that I'm interested in.
I understand that. And do you attend any types of reunions?
I do. About 10 years ago, the battalion I served in, as a rifle company commander in combat, I got a phone call from my FO about 10 years ago, and he introduced himself, and that led to a 10-person reunion,
All right.
and then the next year it was 20, and now it's about 200 of the guys get together. And so
anywhere in the country? Or?
it's every third weekend of September, and they move it around the country. And it's grown into, and it's funny, 9 years in the service, and only the battalion that I was in combat with matters. Everyone else I have no contact with.
Real camaraderie.
We have ties,
Brotherhood.
instant tie. It's a brotherhood. Yep, it's a brotherhood.
Yeah. It's an understanding, a bonding that.
I don't know how to describe it other than the fact that we, I don't know, a special group.
Yeah, absolutely special group.
It's almost 3, Dixie.
Yeah, okay. Well, I think we got to the place where you unite with others. You're in Walla Walla. And is there anything else, Griff, that you would like to add to the end of this interview? It has been most fascinating.
I think I've probably expounded enough. Yeah.
Well, I really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
And I'm very humbled.
Oh, not special in any way.
Well, I'm very humbled to be able to do this. Thank you very much.
Okay.